revenue for counties and sheriffs and all of that, as well as allow more active management of the forests. On the west side, the ONC lands, half of them would go into a trust managed under Oregon law, with Oregonians calling the shots, away from all this litigation and appeal that occurs on federal projects today. So I think it would give us active management, give us jobs, give us revenue, and give us healthier forests and therefore less fires. The other part of the bill extends similar kinds of concepts to the whole federal forest itself, to allow for more active management and more community involvement in the decision making. That's over in the Senate. It's in Senator Wyden's committee. He's got a little different view about how forests should be managed and what we should change out. So we'll see how all that plays out. He's got a hearing on some legislation he has, I think, in early February. So we're sort of in disagreement there, but I'm going to continue to push hard so we have active management and therefore more jobs, more revenue, less fires. Let me stop with that though, because you all came with, I'm sure, questions and comments or whatever. So again, thank you for being here. I want to thank Sheriff Winters for his great service to the county and for being here in the back. And former commissioners here. Hi. CW, good to see you. Thanks for being here. And former sheriff. Yeah, you get to do both.
You're well covered today.
I don't know what that portends, but it doesn't look like that rough a crowd. Never know. So let me stop with that and love to hear from you about what's going on here in Shady Cove, what you're concerned about nationally, internationally, at the state level, CW.
Well, I was reading the report last night, and we've been getting this sporadically over the course of time, that evidently 500 ground-to-air missiles were stolen at Benghazi. And that seems to be the last big revelation that's coming out. And evidently some stories are now coming out of London and parts of Washington about that. So can you give us any inkling of what's going on?
I probably can't comment on that right now, but I can tell you the investigations continue in earnest. We have had numerous hearings, many subpoenas, lots of data collected in the House Intelligence Committee is doing its investigation, the Oversight Committee is doing its, as is the Foreign Affairs Committee. You know, the Senate report came out, bipartisan report, basically saying this could have been and should have been prevented, and yet nobody's been held accountable. And that's the frustrating thing to me is two things. I feel like we were lied to when we were briefed as Congress immediately after the attack and told that it was just a protest gone bad. Look, the only Republican in the delegation, I know what a protest looks like. They come to my office. I can recognize protests. They don't usually come with AK-47s and rocket-propelled grenades. And the next briefing, we actually saw the video from the surveillance cameras on the compound. Anybody who tells you it was a protest gone bad is not telling you the truth. And the president knew, according to military leaders who said they told him. It's really not good. And we need to do a couple of things. Get the truth and not quit until we get the truth. Somebody should be held accountable. And the third thing is we should make sure that those serving our country in these various capacities are never put in this kind of harm's way again. There's a lot of risk out there. They know it when they go into it, but there should have been a way to prevent this from occurring. There.
Well, the second part of that would be the impact of knowing that there are 500 ground-to-air missiles that could shoot down any airline anywhere in the world.
Yeah, those are the ones that should cause you to stay awake at night, especially if you travel. I don't know the answer to that specifically. I'd be sort of surprised if there were that many stored somehow at Benghazi. That is an interesting development, if that's the case. But again, sometimes you find out, some of us in the Congress joke we actually in the classified briefings fall backwards on our information because we miss what's out in the public. It's sometimes what you read in the New York Times or the Washington Post or on Fox or wherever, they actually seem to get more information than sometimes we're given, which is very frustrating. Oh, there's the president now. Sorry.
I heard that story a long time ago, not just recently, and that was a storage place for all kinds of equipment and what CW is talking about. And it was going to Syria. It was unloaded in there, and it was a storage place for that. You know.
I've not heard that officially or formally. I've heard the same sort of discussion, that maybe this was a transiting place for weapons into some of the fighters in Syria that we were trying to support and back up. I've not been able to get that confirmed, but then again, some of the things we've been told turn out not to be quite fully accurate either. So that's why this
I got that on C-SPAN.
Yeah, that's why these investigations need to continue until we get to the bottom of it. And we need to be able to talk to and hear from the people who are actually on the ground at the time. Some of those interviews have occurred. I don't know if all of them have, but I do know that the Intelligence Committee continues to do its work, and they have access to whatever they want.
It'd be good to have the truth come out.
The truth needs to come out.
Yeah.
For those reasons that I said, that, you know, somebody should be held accountable if there was wrongdoing or, you know, just failure to perform. And we need to make sure that our ambassadors and the diplomatic corps and the others out there, wearing the uniforms or not, that are helping us, that they're properly cared for. I still don't understand why you couldn't have put something.
I think it's a failure of the State Department because they were warned off and on 6 months prior to the Benghazi issue of the danger there by Stevens.
Yep.
Okay, and they just ignored it.
And there were other attacks on other ambassadors and other attacks on the consulate in Benghazi. So, yeah.
On this topic, I've done a tremendous amount of research last night on the bipartisan support for Speaker Boehner to form a select committee. And evidently he's resisting to doing that, to get to the truth, as you say. So would you support us forming a select committee to get to the bottom of this story? Yeah,
so there's a lot of discussion about that, I know, on the web, and some people think that's the best way to go. Here's the reason that I don't necessarily agree with that. First of all the committees that are investigating already have full subpoena power, including the Intelligence Committee. Second, so they can and are actively subpoenaing and interviewing and getting witnesses and getting the documents. It's slow. State Department pushes back like they would on a select. I've been on select committees before, or at least one. And yeah, it takes a long time to constitute a select committee. You have to get members off the committees they're on. It's the same members, right? They're just come off of this committee or that committee or whatever. Then you've got to hire a whole nother staff, so you've got a couple $1 million in staff and all of that effort, all to get to the same place you start at, which is they have subpoena power and they have a focus. And so we do a lot of oversight. We did over 1,300 oversight hearings last year alone in the House on different agencies and different programs and things. And so the individual committees, to me, having 3 committees doing investigations is with more staff and same powers is actually stronger. And I think the Speaker feels that way. And I haven't heard a good argument yet on why creating yet a 4th committee to do this gets you beyond where you're at.
And yet the truth has not been really discovered yet. So.
That's a different issue, though, in terms of just drilling down. I don't know how changing a committee structure and adding cost and staff and all gets you anything more than you have today in terms of the tool basket.
So why hasn't the truth been discovered by now, do you think?
We don't have all the data in yet.
Really?
Yeah. But I don't know that it's sort of a difference over tactic and all, not over the ability. And the ability, we've done a lot of investigations on the Energy and Commerce Committee. I wasn't the chairman of the Oversight Investigation Subcommittee, but I kind of ran it under the full committee chair for a period of time. Vast subpoena powers. But what you find with agencies, and any administration does this, when they get pushed, they go into defense. They don't want to give you all the documents. They don't want to give you access to witnesses. They do executive privilege. They do all these things, and they slow walk it. That's what they're doing here. So you may get 20,000 documents in boxes, literally, emails and cables and all those things. The staff has to work their way through. And then somewhere along the way, they go, wait a minute, there's a link here. You didn't give us that. And now you go through the whole process again. Will they give it to you voluntarily when you write a letter? Do you have to issue a subpoena? Do you have to drag them up and testify? Do they then claim some sort of classified nature, and then it's got to go to the Intelligence Committee or Defense or whatever? It's what you face.
Then you retire.
Yeah, then you retire. Yeah, that's why we are not letting up on pressure. That's why I think actually having Darrell Issa, who's not known for being timid, doing his work at O&I or government reform, and we've got Mike Rogers at Intelligence Committee doing that. And you think about the intelligence report out of the Senate committee was bipartisan and pretty explosive, really. So there's more. Yeah.
The gentleman in the blue shirt back there mentioned something. I did not want to come and speak on this, but he raised a very intense question on the ground air missiles. Do any of you, or most of you folks remember Lieutenant Colonel Bo Grites? Remember him?
Oh, yes.
One awesome dude. I don't know him personally, but I know Lars Hansen, who wrote his code book, Nation Betrayed, and called Sir, 2 large volumes of events that covered. What happened prior to when the Russians was in Afghanistan, we literally armed them to the teeth with these pipe weaponry.
Right.
And it was an unholy amount. This could be valuable information because you're in a very sensitive situation. What had taken place is whenever after the Russians fled from the Afghanistan, according to his book, we only bought 3 of them back at the tune of $100,000 per piece. Now wait, we gave it to them free and we buy it back. Boy, it makes good sense to us. They are still plentiful during all this time frame. That's what we're against under these people. So anyway, that's something I wanted to add to his thought patterns. Now maybe sliding from something. I wrote a small proliferal thing. I must be a disgruntled individual, so I'll keep some of my salt down what I really feel underneath. And the subject matters I wrote it down is immigrations I'm really disturbed about. Our closed gates on the lands are like a logging. And by the way, on that subject, I served on the County Commissioners Board of Advisors for 2 years on the subject of logging. When the big fire happened, I want you to know, we had it in writing to cut this stuff, and it burned. And Mr. Link of the Rough and Ready literally closed out with 84 personnel. He could have doubled his work and modernized it if he had only 25% of fire that burned. Now, these people allowed this to happen. I'm really peeved about the water for farming. I'm a member of the Farm Bureau Convention, made it 3 years in a row now for the Farm Bureau, and it is devastating what's happening. And I'm also on the outsourcing of our jobs as well as some rapid fire just because I got a flip over. And the damage that our dam removal, we've used that term, we'll see. The proof is in the pudding. Well, now we see the damage of our dam removal is irreparable. We have chromium-6 in our drinking water, and I'm sure you've heard of this issue. Also, we have got squallfish on the headwaters of our Grove River now that did not exist before the dam. That's a little known thing that's not talked about. And also, the farming is not having the well to do the hay. We want to have we're in a very deprived time frame now. Okay, and the mining situation on the 838 and Senate Bill 838. This has been a sham under the 1866 and 1872 laws. I mean, this is a sham what Mr. Alvin Bates has shoved to us. That man needs to take up his stuff and leave the office. Matter of fact, I put that right to his office. Now, let's get back to the first thing, immigration. Let's get down to some numbers. What we have killed in Iraq and Afghanistan to the tune around 4,000, maybe 4,500 people. More than that committed suicide when they come back. But the thing of this is equated to some numbers to death. And sir, I think you know about it. On our borders, we had since the Iraq War over 100,000 killings. This is some ugly numbers. Go check it out. Okay, but that's what immigration has done for us. Proof is in the pudding. Our prisons are overloaded with Hispanics. Our schools are overloaded with Hispanics. Our medical situation has brought in diseases. There's only one place that brought in diseases more than these folks, is, believe it or not, United States Navy bases. That don't sound right, but check it out. My wife was a preschool teacher at Magoo. Okay, the next thing is, these folks has created crimes. I have seen you in the past. I could show you my son's picture. All you got to do is look at me. He graduated with 500 plus students. You can pick my son out of that class. I did not move to Oregon. I fled from Oxnard, California. Some of you folks know where that's at. And I put it in writing whenever I was asked, and I filled out my unemployment slip. Why did you move here? White flight is what I put down on it. Because the shootings that took place in my neighborhood, I've held 4 Mexicans up with 3 to 4 knife holes in them. The heck, when the medics came to help them, they couldn't even speak Spanish either. And so the thing of it, it cracks me up that we are so politically correct, and that's what's killed us, sir, is our political correctness and afraid to step up to the point and call it like it is. And we all have problems with this. And now then, I worked in Iowa, same thing. I mean, the farmers said our children are leaving the farms. They prayed to the old Heavenly Father. They were blessed. They sent a letter, and now they are now perished with many murders and robberies, just like we are in Southern California. Now, the thing of it is, this is a disturbing situation, and it's got to get tough with this immigration. I dare anybody in this room to reverse the roles, cross the border, and try to sneak into their country, and you will find you may be shot. And let's call it what it is, because it's brutal. What I'm saying is hard to say this, because, oh, you must be a racist. Well, the point is, fact has a way of teaching you the true things in life. And I've had some terrible moments in Oxnard before I fled to this state. My wife had a gun put in her face, you guessed it, by a gang member. I even had a gang member shooting a guy, and I've tried to stop him, being Mr. Goody Two-Shoes. Boy, that was a mistake. I only had cops on my door asking me what happened. While they was in there checking me out. My son said, "Hey, Pop, that's the cop that wouldn't help him out whenever he's being chased by a black guy," because he was a white kid. The cop was given a seatbelt ticket. Oh, God, have mercy, it's terrible. And I was known as the local gringo with the muy grande pistola because I was stupid enough to stand up and stand my ground. Guess who was I was protecting mostly? An old Mexican gentleman who literally fought from Dunkirk clear into Berlin. I literally chased Mexicans off his property because I would do it by force. Gee, now being a cop, you know that don't go over too well. Oh, by the way, I'm a past drug enforcement officer, United States Navy, NIC. I can talk with drug movement too, and it's not pretty. My own people were corrupt. So I don't like cops, even I was one for short times. So anyway, I know I may have offended a lot of you, but pull the head out of the sand, folks, because it's already on you. Oh, by the way, my son is a correctional officer down at San Luis Obispo. You guessed it, guess who's the most people that's in prisons? This is costing us so much money, and our political correctness has cost us so much. So, sir, I'm calling upon you to really tough. You got to get tough. You are tough. But you got guys me in the background. I might be a detriment to you, but hey, I'm to the point, and I'm mad. But I try to clean it up as much as possible.
All right. What's your position on the immigration? What should we do? I know there's a bill and all that, but
Yeah. So there are lots of issues. To me, this is a federal issue, first of all. States have had to try to figure out, and to mix result. You know, you think if you're a border state, what they're dealing with, you were down there. It's a mess. And so before we do anything, we need to get security on the border. I felt that all along. You know, the 86 Act, Simpson-Mazzoli, allegedly was going to do border security, put penalties in place for employers that hired people who weren't here legally.
E-Verify system?
Well, yeah, that came along, but yet do the I-9, and any of us who are employers know, you get the form, and you get a copy of somebody's driver's license, and whatever else they give you, how do I know whether that's legitimate or not? They look pretty legitimate. Take a photocopy, it went in the file, nothing ever happened. And then they did amnesty for everybody who was here, to clear the decks. Well, none of that really worked in the end, because we never had control of the border. And so before we repeat those mistakes, we go from 3 million people that weren't here legally to, you know, now I don't know what the estimates are, they range 12 million, 14 million, whatever. We ought to get control. And now, I also, and I may have disagreement with my friend here, but I grew up on a cherry orchard in the Dalles. I represent a very agriculture-based district, and I'm going to tell you, there isn't the workforce out there to do that work. It's not a matter of pay. The pay is pretty good. In many of these industries, it's hard work, and it takes a skill. It takes a skill to pick pears and cherries and everything else. And I've met with enough growers and enough people in ag, will tell you, they don't come out of the unemployment office. This isn't about skin color. This is about work ethic. And it's hard work. And so we need a system that makes the worker and the employer both legal. And a lot of people who come here to work don't necessarily want to come here for citizenship. They're looking for a better way of life, but they want to be legal while they're here. And this is not just an issue involving people to our south. The Prime Minister of Ireland was over for St. Patrick's Day. It's an annual thing, sat next to the Speaker of the House. The first topic he raised, immigration. So we have 40 or 50,000 people from Ireland here who overstayed their visas and now can't go home and see their families. Now, they broke the law. There needs to be a penalty and move forward, but they broke the law. But it's not just Mexico. And you find this as you go around the country. There are people from other countries. We have a broken visa system. It takes too long. We don't track. 40% of those who are not here legally didn't walk across the Mexican border. They overstayed their visa.
But, Greg, we've been trying to secure the Mexican border for 25 years or more, and we've failed.
So far.
So how would you do it?
I think you continue the effort on having a secure border. Some of that may be more practical to use some sort of electronic surveillance. In some places, it's a physical border. We need to deal with this issue of the tunnels. And again, this isn't necessarily an issue about people coming to pick fruit in the Rogue Valley or the Hood River Valley. What I worry about are the drug traffickers, the human traffickers, the violence. That's what we ought to be concerned about. And if people are here illegally and committing felonies and other serious crimes, you're out of here. You know, we need to work that out. But for a lot of people aren't here for that. They escaped, in some cases, the violence in Mexico.
Also, sir, I'm a retired construction worker. I'm a union pipe welder, local 290 Walden. And in our trade throughout the western United States, folks has come and attacked our jobs. It's not the farm work. I don't know the millions, but I believe it's way more than that's being reported. And repeatedly I'd be on jobs, and they would literally come and ask for work, and we had Mexicans on the jobs. They would literally try to solicit jobs to them, and it's astounding how my job is under attack.
See, this gets back to making sure it's a legal employment system. And that gets them to be verified once you get this piece in place. And then it's pretty easy to sort it out. Once E-Verify really works, I mean, it's working, but when you put everybody, now that means everybody, and there are people who don't like when you work that through, that means everybody's got to prove that they're here legally. Not just those you think might be or not be.
That could be done.
Yeah.
And if you get caught because you hired somebody that's not
Then there's a
legal,
penalty.
then you have a huge penalty for that corporation or whatever.
Right.
But I have a son-in-law in California that has an underground construction company
Right.
all over Northern California. And they used E-Verify. They
Right.
still probably use it. But when that first started, they started using that and, declined hiring somebody.
Right.
Okay? And then out on a job someplace, a month later or whatever, the guy's working for another company who hired him
Right.
because they don't use E-Verify.
Right.
But he was really happy with that system, and they still use it, I think.
Yeah.
You know,
A lot
it
of
works.
employers are going to
It worked,
that.
and it only took like a minute to do it, on the computer.
And I think that's where we end up
I hope so.
on this.
Be good.
If you did it overnight, the disruption in the economy would be pretty extreme. Because basically, it's no secret. I think for most people working farm labor, probably don't have verifiable information.
These jobs are like 45 or 50 an hour.
That's
It's
different.
labor.
Yeah.
They're
That's
union,
different deal.
operation, about 500 people.
Yeah.
But they wanted people that are legal.
Yeah.
That's all. That was our decision.
And that's where we should get to, is where we have a legal work system. If we need guest workers, then we make that decision, and you allow them to come in on a legal basis. But again, it doesn't mean everybody that comes in wants to be a citizen. They may just fill a work.
They just need money.
Like, by the way, Americans do overseas too. We go into countries and work overseas all the time, and there's a system to do that. we ought to be, if I can take my debit card from Columbia State Bank in Hood River out of my wallet, put it in a machine somewhere and get cash out like that, can't we come up with technology that makes this work? Yeah?
I don't mean to switch gears here, but you said something that was interesting, that we've been trying to control the Mexican border for 25 years, and just to put it in perspective, to maybe switch gears into healthcare, it took 30 years just to get hospice recognized as a covered entity by Medicare, and to me, that's also as important to make sure that everyone in this room gets to die with dignity and in peace and in their home, and it's definitely something that we need to work with as we're facing cuts in all levels of care coming up, and I just want to know, how can we help?
You know, speaking up really matters. Making sure that people like me and my colleagues understand at your level, where you're actually helping people hand to hand, the importance of these programs. And I think, and again, I was on a community hospital board for 5 years up in Hood River before I went to the Congress. And so I've seen it from that perspective. I've seen it personally. I literally just signed the forms for my father on hospice, and he died about 20 minutes later. So, I mean, but they were there for my mom and for my mother-in-law. And so, I mean, not only is it compassion care, but again, you know, if you're in this sandwich generation where you're raising your kids and your parents, dealing with your parents, there's a lot of pressure there. And second, when like elderly parents are taking care of each other, having that third person come in and give a little relief to the unpaid caregiver, the other partner in the relationship, is hugely important. Just a few minutes, just 15 minutes to be able to kind of step away, I found was really, really important. And somebody that could just give you the assurance, no, this is okay, or no, this does need treatment, or just that other set of eyes that's experienced and calm from the outside. So I've been a big fan of hospice and home health care, just because I think, otherwise, what happens? They sit in place. I mean, this actually happened with my father. There was a day or two period where he came home, and the home health person came in and found he had not gotten out of his chair in like 24 hours. Yeah. And she said, "Now wait a minute." And he couldn't get out of his chair. Now, you know, how long would he have maybe sat there? 36, 40, I don't know. But she spotted that, figured out what was wrong, and he was able to stay home, you know, for months more. But
Well, and with all of the cuts coming, it's taking some agencies, you know, hospitals are getting smart about where the business needs to go. Obviously, it's to home health, but they want to funnel it all into their own, home health, who are 2 and 3 weeks out sometimes. When we can start same day, next day, and we're standalone, so we don't get the same recognition.
see, and that's what you need. It's that first, I found at least, it's that first few days. I'm not a trained medical person, and all of a sudden, mom's coming home or dad's coming home, and it's like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And there may be something you have to deal with, and that's when you really need
rural
it.
communities, we're not going to be able to serve everyone.
And on that point, when we passed the Medicare drug program, I actually got an add-on 5% payment for rural home health care providers. Now, it ran out at some point. It just making the case, it actually costs more because you got to drive distances. You know, you have to allow a county, maybe an hour out to somebody's house and back or somewhere. Yeah.
Well, I just want to jump in on this. My dad has Alzheimer's disease, and I'm going to just say a point to that. But he had a physical therapist that came to his house through home health, and he was frequently falling. He's still in his home 3 years later,
Wow.
which is saving thousands upon thousands of dollars. Would he have had to move to an assisted living, he would have been on Medicaid, you know. So having a service that lasted, you know, a few weeks, coming in, teaching him how to, you know, properly walk, use equipment, helping set up his house for success, has made just a huge difference in his quality of life, but also has saved us, you know, a ton of money. We have saved the system a ton of money. So real
And he has a better quality of care.
Well, much
I mean,
better.
not that it's bad in the hospital or nursing home, but let's face it, I don't know about you, I'd rather be home.
Yeah, he can sit out on his deck, look
Right.
over he has pretty, you know,
Comfort.
scene. Yeah, it's very good. So, but I did want to say thank you very much for supporting the budget that covered Alzheimer's research.
Oh, yes.
And also, I wanted to encourage you to take a look at HR Bill 1507, which is the Hope for Alzheimer's Act, which is a Medicare package that helps people get an early diagnosis, which also could save millions in the big picture. I had a handout.
Okay. I'm shocked.
I've already talked to Troy about
Troy's
it,
got it
so,
down
yeah.
too. No, that again was one of them that, again, getting back to sequester, we were able to find other savings. But we put, I think, $1 billion back into medical research at NIH. And the problem was, they had all these studies going on, and right in the middle of it, they get cut, which means so you might have a multi-year study going on, and because of the arbitrary nature of the cuts, all of a sudden they have to suspend the study, stop the study. Well, all that value that went into that goes away then, and the medical research we're trying to get answers to these problems halts. Wasn't a very smart way to trim. Yes, sir?
We appreciate you.
Neither I nor anybody that I know is opposed to in-home health care
Okay.
where it's needed. But where is the justification for that being a legitimate federal government responsibility?
Yeah. So I would say because the federal government, whether you agree or not, has taken over Medicare. This was a 1960s program. Certainly home health care factors in as a piece of that care. And I would say if we as taxpayers are going to pay for Medicare, which we do, we subsidize it about 50% from the general fund, then we ought to be doing it in a way that gets it as inexpensively and efficiently and whatever else is possible.
What it sounds like you're saying is, we got sucked into it and now we can't get rid of it.
No, I wouldn't say it that way. I
Where do you
think,
draw the line between the responsibility of the federal government, legitimate responsibilities from a constitutional aspect versus some other way to do it that does not lead to all these other unintended
Yeah.
consequences?
yeah, you try and pare this back to where you can, but I think if we're going to have Medicare, which I support, and I think Medicare makes sense, it's a federal program, it's been there for 60 years, people rely upon it greatly. People pay into
Me
it throughout their life.
Okay.
It's something we're forced to pay into, required to pay into, right? And so then when you do retire, you should be able to get it. So I look at it and say, we ought to make sure that that program works as efficiently and affordably as possible. Now here's the good news as Oregonians. If every state operated as efficiently and affordably as we do, Medicare would not run a deficit. That was a study done now about 4 years ago. Problem is that not every state does. So from a federal perspective, what we need to do is try and get efficiencies into the system in other states that frankly get double the reimbursement rate per person, per county, per year that we get.
Why isn't that the responsibility of those states?
Because it's a federal system. Medicare's
Why is it
federal.
a federal system?
Because it was created that way.
Which again, means we're stuck with it. We
Well-
can't do anything about it.
That's probably true.
We
Yeah.
have to try to improve it because it's already there,
Yeah,
instead of saying we shouldn't be in it at all.
yeah. Is it your view we should just cancel Medicare then?
I understand the difficulty of now canceling a program
Right.
that's in place and is part of our lives. I'm asking the philosophical question, is that a federal responsibility versus state, local, something else?
Yeah. It's a fair philosophical question. I assume
I
from your
understand.
positioning of it that you don't think it should be a federal
Right.
program. All right. Yeah.
And maybe we're already tied up in Medicare and 100 other things. That doesn't mean we've got to do more.
Right.
We can draw the line and say enough is enough. The state should step up, the local community should step up, nonprofit organizations should step up. We as a society ought to find other ways to do it without creating an additional federal bureaucracy that's going to be inefficient.
And you and I would agree fully on, I then assume, I'll make an assumption here, Tom, on Obamacare, which I opposed from day one on a lot of those principles. And yet, now we have it. And now we have the state trying to replicate all the bad work of the federal government when it comes to the website. Only they even do it worse here than the federal system. I mean, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars blown. I want a full investigation, because it's mostly your federal tax dollars that have funded the state, Cover Oregon, and all those great billboards and ads. What a waste of money.
Yeah.
Think what you could do with $100 or $200 million, you know, or just not spend it. We wouldn't be borrowing it then. Oh, somebody needs to be held accountable in the state of Oregon. And right now, it seems like they just sort of walk away. And I think they ought to scrap the Cover Oregon website. Just have people use the federal website. At least you can sign on to that. It's still not built out. I think it has huge security issues and all that. And by the way, you know, they're not getting the population that they said they needed, which were the uninsured. It's mostly people they canceled, but now are coming back on. And young people, you want to offend a young
If you were
person?
30 years old, would you sign up for health care?
Let me go there. Let me go there. Thank you. If you're 25, 27, let's say, you're not on your parents' plan anymore, so you're 27.
Yeah, why
You
would
want
you
to
buy it?
offend a 20-something? Tell them they got to buy something they don't want, don't think they need, and send them to a website that doesn't work
The
to do
penalty's
it.
$95 the
Ah,
first
this
year.
makes no sense. None of this makes sense.
Let's pose that question to my friend Colby here.
I'm actually exempt.
Uh-oh.
Thank you.
Yeah, but it's true, and so they're not getting young people signing up. I think it's like 24%, and they need 40% of the 18 to 34-year-olds signing up. And so then the formulas they base the premiums on, the pooling that they have to have, isn't going to work. And by the way, they don't want you to know that before the election, so they move the announcement of the premium until conveniently the month after the election. I mean, this is outrageous.
And the thing is, that a year from now, when they don't have enough money to fund it all, they're gonna come back to you for more money.
I told them, day one, do not.
That's in the
I-
bill.
No, what's it? Well, now, are you talking about federal or state?
Federal.
Oh, okay, I was talking about the state deal, where they get the advance money to show savings.
Yeah, you'll spend like so many more billion to handle stuff.
Look, this thing is a unmitigated disaster. Now, some people get access they wouldn't have had. There are provisions, this, putting your kid onto your 26, we probably agree works. I mean, there are some things. We needed to deal with some reforms. We needed to deal with people who were being denied by the insurance company the ability to get insurance. You can do that through high-risk pools. We don't pioneer that in Oregon. There's an affordable way to handle that. You didn't have to blow up everybody's insurance
That
coverage
was
to
my
get there.
career.
Oh, good, so you can counsel me here.
understand it.
Am I on track?
They had long-term care built into the healthcare bill.
Oh, yeah,
And they
but
had pulled it out after a year and a quarter.
we shot it.
Huh?
We guessed.
Yeah.
It
Why
was-
did they pull it out? Well, they couldn't pay for it.
Whoa, oh, it's worse than that. It's worse than that, yes.
Well, you paid money in 5 years, and then you could collect.
Now wait, stop there,
Okay.
freeze frame.
But
You know
They did all
why?
that, and they didn't have enough
You know why?
money to
Freeze frame.
finance it.
You know why? Because they could count that as revenue against the cost of Obamacare, which made Obamacare look less costly. In the out years came the payout, which, the way it was structured, would have gone bankrupt pretty rapidly.
Right.
But on the way government does its accounting, because they looked in a certain window, they saw the revenue come in, and they didn't have to look at the expenditure going out.
Right.
And so this was the,
Who would pay something for 5 years and have no coverage?
right. This was Senator Kennedy's, this was Senator Kennedy's bill that got put in. And when, this was one of, you've heard how we voted to repeal Obamacare 40-some times. This is one of those votes, and we actually were successful.
That's
Just
good.
like we were in the budget, pulling $1 billion out of the slush fund.
Yeah.
And $10 million out of IPAP. IPAP, you have all these people appointed, 6-figure salaries, 6-year terms, they answer to nobody, and you can't appeal their decision in any meaningful way.
Can I ask a question on a different subject?
Sure.
The reports a few months ago were that many of the top military officers were either fired, sacked, whatever.
Right.
Now, I understand from a news report not too very long ago, there's some 200 top military officers have been sacked. What's going on with our military?
It's
Is this just a match between them and?
It's a good question. I don't know that I have a good answer, to be honest with you. I keep reading this. Troy is
I think if you
Marine.
take a look at a lot of those cases, it's personal misconduct, and I'm not gonna say that it's epidemic.
Bogus poker chips, come on.
I'm not saying
Chips
all
are
of them.
bogus to begin with.
I'm not saying all of them, I'm saying if you
Supposed
look
to play
at,
for
if you look at
cash,
a lot of
right?
these cases, it's personal misconduct. And you're talking about senior military officers, and a lot of it is improper relationships. But there have been plenty, though,
Yeah.
that have been removed from command for pretty dubious reasons. So, is it an attack on the military? I can't say that. Is it a change in the philosophy coming down from the secretary? That's quite possible.
It's an unanswered right now. Because then you gotta get in, oh, is there, you know, we don't necessarily get into the personnel files of each one of these and investigate, you know, who he said, she said, who did what to whom. But it does seem like, at least in the press accounts, there are more than perhaps are normal. I don't know if that's true.
Are we as a country then kind of vulnerable because we're losing these top officers?
Well, you're also seeing, remember, pretty substantial cuts in the military in terms of money through sequestering.
Right.
And some of that may be natural attrition as well, that they're just downsizing. I don't know. I think the bigger risk is not the loss of a few hundred officers, because we've got many thousands, but I think it is, do we have the proper training going on, the ability for our troops to train, and the right equipment and replacement equipment, so when they're put in harm's way, they're ready to go. And that's actually a very real hollowing out issue that we are addressing in this budget. So I hear that more from my colleagues who are on the Armed Services Committee and represent bases, and that's what I hear most. I don't really hear much, and we haven't had much discussion about the individual generals that have been replaced and all that. That just doesn't pop up much. And it would, I think, if there was a really bad pattern here. So I'll ask Chairman McKean. Yeah.
I hate to sound like a broken record, the last time we talked was about Cuffa. There's thousands of Oregonians who have cabins, and they've had them in their families for generations, and I'm talking to a few of them, and says they're gonna have to lose them because the cabin fees have doubled in the last year. And these are things that they're basically, little, not fancy places, and they're in the middle of the forest land and the Forest Service. So we just want to know what's happening with that law. I mean, there's some changes, so you knew something about that.
Yeah, and since we talked, we've only been in session like 1 week, so I didn't get a chance to ask the chairman of the Resources Committee, but we're trying to push back on that, as you know. And so I don't have a better answer for you on CUFA yet. Do you know anything, Riley, on that, on CUFA? Are you doing anything on that?
Doc's got his bill that we reform all that. But
It has a,
I don't think can't remember if he had a hearing. He tried to include it in the timber bill last session, but.
Well, a lot of the cabin owners are not paying their fees, hoping that there'll be some relief, on that.
it's on our list.
It's not a big issue, it's not a.
Unless you're a cabin owner.
Well, yeah.
His
it's
fees
just,
double.
But it's something that's dear to a lot of people's hearts about, what's happening.
It's a big issue if you're 80 years old and your father built that cabin.
There you go.
That's right.
There you go. Yeah. And you
But
begin to feel like,
I have a friend that has that situation up like the woods.
yeah,
He hadn't got enough money to pay it this month, so he's hoping he can scrape enough to pay it the next month. And his father built the cabin.
Yeah.
Still got his dad's nuts and bolts upstairs.
wow.
And it's gonna go away.
The fees are actually more in most of these instances than the city taxes would be for
Yeah.
sidewalks,
Yeah.
sewers, lights, and pavement. And none of that exists for these cabins.
It just feels like they just want to,
You gotta get out of the forest.
Yeah.
You can't be in the forest.
I do have one question. Is it true that, I've been in the hospital myself and my wife, so I asked them, I said, what do you think about this Obamacare? Nobody will say a word. It's my understanding, and this came from a healthcare person that told me, that said, don't ever mention my name. If they say anything disparaging, because it's in their paperwork they sign to get the federal funds, If they say anything, they'll be cut off.
We
Is that-
ran
Can that be true?
No, I don't believe that's the case. We ran that out. As I recall, that is not accurate.
Well, they're sure being quiet.
Yeah, that's interesting, because most people I talk to in the healthcare world are not being quiet about
Well,
it. And
they're-
not happy
yeah.
about it, and they're more than happy.
Well,
They know you're not gonna rat on them.
Yeah,
You're talking to people at the bedside who
Yeah.
haven't even felt the effects yet.
Yeah,
yeah,
And when staffing
No.
gets cut, that's when they're gonna start talking about it.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point. I met with an anesthesiologist last night who's just half berserk about what's happening in healthcare as it affects them.
Well, panels exist. We have a good friend who has cancer treatment, and has been getting it. And then he was told you can't get it anymore because we only authorize this test once a year, and he has to have it every 6 months. Cancer follow-up is customary and normal
Right.
procedure, and you're saying, well, how do I get it? And I says, well, you have to appeal to the panel. And well, who's the panel? And then he was told, if you're over 70, he had what is it, a colonoscopy check, and you're supposed to get them every 5 years. Well, you can't get them. You have to get them every 10 years now that you're 70. I mean, so, or if you don't like that, you can get it, you can go to the panel. Those are the most recent changes.
All
to
this is starting to,
Medicare.
see,
Yeah.
this is what's starting to
So
come.
the
and
panels
that's-
exist. They are real, they
They are
exist.
real.
And you have to
And that's
appeal for any medical.
before IPAB kicks in, the Independent Payment Advisory Board, because it is, it kicks in when there's a certain cost threshold that hits, and then they bring the cost down. That's where you're really gonna start.
Well, I used to work for a long-term acute care hospital in Portland, and we would have appeals all the time against discharge. And the judges are 2.5 years out, so your friend could, very well be gone by that time
Yeah.
for not receiving treatment while he's still waiting for an appeal.
Well,
I
he
think
can
they
pay
call
for
that
it. He
ration.
can pay for it. It's about $20,000 for the test.
Yeah. I think they call that rationing, which is what we've warned about. There are other countries that have nationalized healthcare system. They have budget issues too. They just delay who gets access to what care when. Why do you think wealthy Canadians often come down here to get more quick medical treatment? And I don't think that's good for our country to adopt that concept, but it's where we're at. Yes, ma'am.
This is on healthcare, but a little different area, and I mentioned this to you a couple weeks ago. This joint notice of privacy practices.
Right, I read through that.
That you initial. And so one of the things that will be disclosed without your express permission about you is if it's for protective services for the president and others.
Right.
So are we signing away our privacy rights when we initial these privacy forms now in our medical care?
It would
Seems to have changed.
Seems to have changed. I was really, because we had that discussion the other morning or other, I think it was other afternoon, I guess it was. And then you sent me that document or gave it to me, and I was pretty surprised to see that in there as well. And I would think that they would have to get some sort of legal document to allow you. I don't know, we got 2 sheriffs here, I don't mean to put you guys on this form of current, but.
But are we signing away our right to anything legal?
You're signing.
To protect ourselves?
Apparently on that.
This is through Asante.
Right, whatever that is, you're apparently agreeing to.
But they don't tell you, they just say, we need you to sign this document about your privacy rights.
Right.
Or initial, and you electronically initial. And I said, could I please have a copy of that?
Yeah.
But normally, they don't offer a copy.
Yeah.
It's more than 4 pages,
Yeah.
and you initial before you even look at it.
Yeah.
I think you're acknowledging that you've received it. You're not acknowledging that you've.
That you're
approved it.
giving your rights away.
No, I think you're just acknowledging that you've received it. They are required under the law to provide it to you. So I don't think that you're agreeing to anything. I think you're just signing that you've received it.
You don't know that for sure, though.
I don't know that for sure, but I'm pretty sure.
But if you ask, they'll let you take
Yes.
it home
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
before you sign it.
When
But
my
they don't have
wife
a
broke
stack
her
of them
hip,
sitting there, and they're not handing
they
them
brought it to
out.
her
Right.
after she was under
A lot of places do that.
under the morphine and stuff to sign.
Yeah.
And I was a little upset about that.
Yeah.
big issues. I work with a lot of things, campaign contributions, we give money where the problems we have, Microsoft, really big problems. They're throwing money into schools, healthcare, United Nations, yourself, all kinds of things.
Why is that?
Monsanto.
Why is Microsoft specifically?
Not just Microsoft specifically, many companies, Google, Eli Lilly, there's all kinds of companies that are throwing a lot of money around, especially politicians and into the government system entirely. It kind of stifles the voice of the people. Although corporations are quote unquote people now, but it's a big problem. I mean, you've got, what, 1.5 in your bank account right now for campaign contributions.
More like 1.6.
1.6.
But limits on all of that.
There are limits, but when you've got
5,000 per pack. And you know, none of the corporate money goes into federal campaigns and hasn't since the 1905. That's federal law, no corporate money.
Right.
So the only thing that goes into a company's PAC, like Microsoft, are individual donations from Microsoft employees. That's the federal
Not
law. No, that's the federal law.
Okay, but then you
That's
still have
all.
them funding all of these other things that are obviously not helpful. I mean,
Like what?
Monsanto, they're funding Monsanto, they're funding a lot of different other things.
So tell me, because Microsoft was one you pointed
Well, I
out,
mean, it's,
so what's the
Bill
issue?
Melinda Gates funded a lot of the Common Core, which if we didn't take in the Common Core, we got left with one child left behind. Neither system's good, but Common Core is a little bit better than one child left behind. So.
They also fund a lot of medical assistance in foreign
Medical assistance,
countries. It's pretty remarkable
Vaccinations,
what their foundation does, so.
They do very good things, but they also, at the same time, are doing other things that just don't make any sense.
Well, to you, I mean, we all have our disagreements and disagreements
Exactly.
on.
What is your take on this? How could we actually, because Tom kind of brought this up a little bit, how could we remove that and the federal arm from state funding? So like, say we get school funding, we get Head Start funding, we get medical funding, we get all this funding from the feds. Every time there's always a string attached to it, which also in some ways seems like it's a string from a corporation or office.
Really?
To a lot of people, that's the,
So what would you propose?
having the federal government, although they want to push a program, remove the strings and allow the states to actually have the rights on it. Let them take over
But from the corporate,
program.
from the corporate side, what do you suggest? That they shouldn't be able to contribute to anybody or their employees?
You know,
So.
personal individuals can contribute what they wish, obviously,
Right.
but when it's corporations pushing all of these things, I mean, they've got more of an ear with many people than any honest citizen does. It gives them an upper hand.
Yeah, I get nervous when federal government starts to limit speech, whether it's for a company or individuals. Because I think more speech is better than less speech. Less government control over that speech is better. I'm a First Amendment guy. I have a degree in journalism. And I get a lot of speech I don't necessarily agree with comes my way on the internet or in meetings or protests or, Facebook goes to. Yeah. But you know what, that's part of our democracy too, as long as it's not like overtly threatening and really nasty and all that, tone down, because we never disagree with. Yeah.
How about a law that says only registered voters can donate to a campaign, political campaign? No corporate.
Well, again, there's no federal corporate, federal candidates can't take corporate money anyway. They can't. But the Supreme Court has said that corporations can have a voice in political debate, that's protected under the Constitution, which is a document I have in my code. Under the First Amendment, as a company, you have a right to speak and get your views out there. That's protected speech under the Constitution, which I've taken oath to uphold.
But let's say no money from corporate.
But money is equated to speech, and money can be the same. You can't speak without money. Right? It's hard to have speech in the public forum. You can go out on a soapbox, but that doesn't quite get the message out.
But I was thinking of like Soros, those kinds of people
Right.
that donate huge amounts, millions,
Right.
to campaigns for their benefit.
Right.
Why not remove that? You have a ceiling of how much you can donate.
There is a ceiling on total individual contributions to federal campaigns. All campaigns. It's an annual amount that cannot be
What
exceeded.
is it?
It's 130, don't hold me to this number, I'll get fact checked by somebody. It's like 130,000, 135,000. That's to all federal candidates or campaigns. State party, federal parties, individual candidates. That's actually being litigated before the Supreme Court right now as to whether you should be able to give to 200 members of Congress $2,000 or whatever. I mean,
What about term limits?
that can be litigated by the people, but the Constitution, again, federal Constitution, you'd have to change the federal Constitution. You have term limits in a sense that you can vote somebody out. Half of our Republican conference has served less than 4 years. Half. Because of the turnover in 2010 and 2012. So there's actually in the House been a lot more turnover in the last 4 to 6 years than it is, yeah, in part. There was a big turnover in 06 in that election cycle too, the other way. So, Americans kind of come back and forth, push and pull. That's all right.
To add a little humor to this,
Yeah.
Congressman, the news was reporting that this is a do-nothing Congress because of the political divide. And
Many audiences, you get a round of applause.
well, that's what I was going to say. I said, thank God. No more rules coming down. How about a moratorium?
Well, that's the thing. There are like 10 times as many, well, it varies based on how many bills we pass, but the rule writers are on some illegal drug. I mean, it is just unbelievable the number of rules. There was a study on it's like 500 rules per law. I stood next to the rules that have been written so far on Obamacare. I'm 6 feet tall and shrinking, but it's 7 feet of paper.
Did you read it?
Are you kidding me? 7 feet of rules, and they're not done. Dodd-Frank and these other things, I mean, it's just, how does anybody do anything anymore? And the tragedy for the country are the number of people who are approaching retirement, who have been successful in their own businesses, who say, if I had to do it over again, I'm not sure I would. That's the wrong attitude for America. Here we have the opportunity to try things. We don't need this much government in our lives. It suppresses our economic growth. I think it's why we have not had the kind of recovery that we've experienced in most post-recessions. It's pretty lackluster, pretty bad. And it's because you can't do anything anymore without somebody saying, well, you got a rule here, you got another rule here. And I want to get back to where we have more individual freedom, more opportunity to try things on our own. My wife and I were in small business 22 years. There was a period about 8 years into it when we really figured out what we were doing and looked back and thought, oh my God, if we'd known then what we know now, we never would have done this. But now we have it figured out, We could have failed. We could have failed. But we kept working at it. One more. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
thanks. Dams were mentioned earlier. What's your position on KBRA? And also, Obama wants the Trans-Pacific Partnership to go through, as does Speaker Boehner.
Have you-
So what's your position on TPP as well?
Well, I haven't seen it yet.
Well, what you know about it?
It hasn't been negotiated yet. So I try to at least understand what's in a bill before I take a position on it. In fact, they're supposed to have a meeting in February in Singapore. They're not even sure they're going to meet. Trade is actually a positive thing if the agreement's written right. It's really important for our ag exports in our district, huge. And frankly, for our state, being on the Pacific Rim, it matters a lot. But you got to evaluate these agreements each on their own.
The effects of against sovereignty, American sovereignty, though. I mean,
Well, that comes first.
Pardon?
That comes first.
Sovereignty does.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. On the KBRA issue with dam removal,
KBRA?
Yes,
Dam
dam.
removal, I support the dam removal.
you do or do not?
I do not.
Okay. Thanks.
Did you get that? Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Look, and the community doesn't support it either. And the Congress is not supportive of it. But somehow we still have a problem that needs to be resolved in the basin, so we've got agriculture healthy again. And in this drought year, we're facing another huge, huge potential catastrophe in that basin. And so it's not good enough to just say, I don't like that. We need to figure out how to bring the community together and find a solution that works and that's affordable.
What's the future of logging in southern Oregon coming back sometime?
I was more optimistic in September than I am now. When we had our bipartisan bill, and believe me, I've got hit from the right, hit from the left about that. If I could write my own bill, I'd write my own bill, and we'd just be doing logging. But in this divided government we have, this is our best hope. And we got a big bipartisan vote in September on that bill. And then it goes to the Senate, it goes up on the rocks. And I really thought and hoped that our senators would pick that bill up because you had 3 of us in the delegation from very different viewpoints starting out and coming to a common place.
I just think it's sad because we get close to 60% of our wood from Canada, finished timber to build a house. You know,
And it could be right here.
and the private loggers, and I know some of them in this area, it's going over to Coos Bay to go to China. And they're getting a third more money for that wood.
Yeah, for the logs.
Also, sir,
That's only off private land, by the way.
Private land.
Because there's a prohibition, as you know, on the federal. So
That's
we're
what's
on
going on.
federal.
also, sir, on that same note, Josephine County at one time had 52 sawmills.
Yep.
And now we have 0. And we are actually growing trees faster than we can possibly cut them. And we got a dry season coming.
Yep.
We have problems.
Well, this was a proposal we had 5 years ago, and we have a video on it. And how long has it taken us?
I know,
I
and we
think
gotta
it's the
build
East
through that.
Coast. The East Coast dominates us.
Here,
Everything with
thank
east
you.
of Mississippi, they make the rules for us.
And you know the other part, they don't feel our pain. Because less than, I don't think there's a state east of Mississippi that has more than 5% of their land under federal control.
I know.
And so you get less than Mississippi, where states like ours is over half, and other states it's 70, 80%. But we don't have the votes. You only have 5 in Oregon, I can only get 3,
We don't
right?
have an industry here. The market down the street here is 70% food stamps goes through their register at supermarket. I mean, why?
This is why we need to get back to responsible use of our resources to create good paying family wage jobs. And it'll save taxpayers money because we'll generate positive cash flow, and you won't have as many catastrophic fires. We spent $2 billion last year fighting fires.
Do you know how many fires they've had in California in the last 30 days? 150.
Yeah. And that's where it starts, is down
Yeah.
south, worse its way up here. Well, I appreciate you coming out. I've got to head down.
In 1 month.
Vets, you have not said anything about how we're gonna take care of our vets with
Sure.
all the cuts, the medical care that they've received in a lot of different places. What about our vets?
That's fair. I'm glad you raised that, because I'm a big supporter of our veterans, and in fact, in the budget agreement, which I supported, we actually plus up funding for more help for our veterans, especially those just coming back that have traumatic brain injury, that have other special medical needs. And on the COLA issue involving medically retired veterans, we actually take care of that in this bill as well and restore that COLA. As you know, I've been a big supporter of the medical facility at White City, helped save it from closure, and have helped put funds in that to retrofit it and expand it. And all in it.
Well, 1%, I don't think it, I mean, how much has our currency been devalued when you're talking about 1% of an increase? Isn't that what it was, 1% increase for the COLA?
Oh, no, okay, so we're talking separate issues here.
Okay,
The 1% is a pay increase for active duty military.
okay.
Equal for vets as well. Equal amount for vets as well.
So it's a 1% pay increase. So we got them salary. Look, they were facing a huge budget cut. We offset that. And so I get beat up for setting off the sequester, which would have hammered veterans and active duty military.
Then the other programs, we have so much fraud in them, just with health care. When you talk about home health, there may be very good programs to fund there. However, with the federal government sending checks to dead people, as we first discussed in the beginning, the budget, you have people that are right here in the Rogue Valley that are paying their daughters nearly $1,000 a month to take care of them in their homes. I mean, if somebody needs professional home health, that's one thing. You need, I mean, the fraud needs to come out. And the federal government has not been able to do that. How long were we sending checks to illegals And,
Too long.
yeah.
But we did something about it. I mean, that's.
How long did it
Well,
take?
I don't know. A lot, too long. I'm with you.
Very long.
I'm with you. If you got examples of fraud, there are ways to turn those into
I
appropriate
have.
officials.
I have.
Yeah, okay, good. We all ought to be looking for that and eliminating it.
Except nothing has been done. It still continues to this day.
Yeah. Well, we're trying to get it, I mean, we got several things in this appropriations bill. I fully agree. People say, oh, there's nothing to cut. Nancy Pelosi said nothing to cut, left to cut in government. Baloney. And we proved it here. It's hundreds of millions of dollars just stopping payments to people who are in jail and don't deserve them. And it's even more than that, who are defrauding the government, us, the taxpayers, when it comes to people who are dead, and then they, that master death list we shut off.
I just think
There's
those
much
are
more I
something
could go
that they shouldn't have happened to begin with.
Fully agree.
A lot of those dead people vote in some cities.
That's
Yeah.
true. I fully agree.